Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. Just a second, I will share my screen. Yeah. So, I will speak about Mesoamerican languages in this area have been reported to lack a dedicated means of expressing the caritive semantics. And this microtypological study identifies alternative strategies that the languages in this area employ to function without. Well, this is the outline of my talk. First, I will introduce Mesoamerica. Then I will say a few words about my sample. I will present three main strategies for expressing the caritive meaning in the languages of Mesoamerica, the use of the borrowed preposition sin, the development of a semantically restricted marker that is only used with specific types of absentees, and negative constructions. At the end of my talk, I will discuss some parallels between Mesoamerica and its neighbors. Well, Mesoamerica is a nice part of the world that encompasses Central and Southern Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. It extends along the Pacific coast from northern Mexico to the coast of Honduras and Nicaragua. The Mesoamerican cultural area and its borders were first defined by Kirchhoff. Also, the area emerged more than 4,000 years ago. Its geographic configuration did not remain intact over time. In addition, there is no consensus with regard to the continuity of this area after the Spanish conquest. It is evident that this area has a nucleus and peripheral parts in which some traits are present and others are absent. Mesoamerica has been considered to be a linguistic area since the classic publication by Campbell and colleagues, in which they identify several prominent linguistic features dispersed throughout this area. These features include head marking in nominal possession, the use of relational nouns instead of preposition, vigesimal numeral systems, non-verb final word order, and several widespread semantic cases. And these features were shared due to language contact among speakers of different languages within that region long before the conquest. The nuclear part of the Mesoamerican linguistic area includes languages belonging to at least 5 language families, namely Uto-Aztecan, Mayan, Totonacan, Otomanguean, and Mesoamerican, along with several isolates such as Oaxaca Chontal, Xinca, Cuitlatec, Huave, and Purépecha. The dialects of Oaxaca Chontal are sometimes considered to constitute a small Tequistlatecan language family, and the same is true of Xinca and Xincan family. The inclusion of Purépecha in the Mesoamerican area was questioned. The language sample for this study was chosen with the aim of representing all the families and subgroups within the area. The goal was not to obtain a perfectly representative and balanced sample. Instead, the languages selected were those for which the most accessible and complete sets of linguistic data were available. Grammatical descriptions of Mesoamerican languages typically do not discuss the caritive meaning and its means of expression. This scarcity of information can be an indication of a low cross-linguistic frequency of this category. Hence, if there is no mention of caritive markers in the grammars and vocabularies of a certain language, this can be an evidence of the lack of a dedicated marker in that language. And alternative strategies to express the caritive meaning were identified on the basis of analysis of texts. This is my language sample. It currently includes 20 languages from these 5 families and 2 isolates. Here I just repeat those 4 strategies that I will be discussing now. Some Mesoamerican languages have a dedicated marker that is of Spanish origin. In the event of the absence of a proper means of expressing the caritive, these languages took advantage of the fact that Spanish has a useful preposition to express the corresponding meaning. And this is notable given the fact that Mesoamerican languages are generally averse to having a wide set of prepositions. These languages prefer constructions with possessive nominals. Well, there are 3 examples here, and example 3 from Mesquital Valley Otomi shows that the preposition sin can be adapted to the phonological system of the target language. This language has the caritive marker C, which displays initial nasalization and lacks the last consonant. Contrary to the general statement that I made above, some languages in this area do have dedicated caritive markers. However, they are used with a restricted class of absentees, and this restriction is of a semantic nature. For example, there are caritive markers for body parts or clothes. Such markers cannot be considered to be general caritive indicators, as they are incompatible with most caritive situations. Yucatec Maya, for example, has the morpheme kul. It is derived from the word meaning stump. This morpheme, when being attached to a noun denoting a body part, conveys caritive semantics. A similar marker in Sierra Popoluca could have been derived from the Proto-Mihesocian word for naked. And the third example is from Chorti, a Mayan language. In Chorti, there is a caritive word koror, which is apparently used with nouns denoting clothes. The most common way of conveying the caritive meaning is the addition of a negative constructions. This strategy is found in the vast majority of the languages that have been studied. Negative copulative predications are one of the most common possibilities, as shown in the first example. Another closely related option is to employ a negative existential predicate. In Pomchi, in the second example, the caritive meaning is expressed via an additional dependent clause introduced by the general subordinator chi. There are also less widespread strategies that involve additional negative clauses. For example, speakers can use a standard negative sentence with a negated noun as a mixed text. Here, a standard negator who is added to a noun phrase. Another option is a standard negative verbal clause. In the second example, the caritive meaning is expressed for a negative clause introduced by a standard conjunction na and is formed by the stative verbal from zo with a negator b. Instead of saying without sombrero, this sentence can be roughly translated as "and the sombrero is not put on," something like this. Such, so to speak, periphrastic constructions are widespread in Mesoamerica, probably because they allow for the avoidance of a straightforward expression of a caritive meaning that is impossible in these languages. Negative commutative constructions would be the most obvious option for placing dedicated caritive markers. These two meanings seem to be opposed with regard to polarity. However, this strategy remains marginal in the languages of the Mesoamerican area. Constructions that literally say not with, meaning without, are rarely found in these languages. A Chontal dictionary registered the construction matched ok as a possible translation of the Spanish word sin. The combination matched ok consists of the negator match and the word ok, which means with, and is typically used in commutative constructions in Chantal. However, whether matched ok is actually employed productively in Chantal remains unclear. The borrowed preposition sin appears consistently in the examples in the dictionary and in the published texts as well. Another evidence of negative commutative clauses can be seen in Celtal. In some dialects of this language, it is possible to combine the standard negative marker ma with the word form sok with. It is interesting to note that both Chontal and Celtal belong to the Mayan family. It is still unclear to me whether their genetic relationship may play a role here, and consequently whether the possibility of the use of negative commutative constructions to express the caritive semantics can be considered as a typically Mayan feature rather than a feature of Mesoamerican in general.
You have 5 minutes left.
Thank you. Well, the claim that Mesoamerican languages have no dedicated means of expressing the caritive meaning cannot be generalized to the Amerindian languages in general, of course. In fact, dedicated caritive morphemes or constructions have been observed in a wide range of languages in South, Central, and North America. It is interesting that the languages spoken to the south of Mesoamerica generally have dedicated caritive markers. This is true of at least Miskito, Pech, and Garifuna. For example, in Miskito, a Mesoamerican language spoken in Nicaragua and Honduras, there are two dedicated caritive markers, the suffix s and the postposition a. By contrast, the languages spoken to the north of Mesoamerica are structurally very similar to Mesoamerican languages with regard to the expression of the caritive meaning. The Yucatecan languages, Choditara-Ramori and Hopi, the Islate Seri, the Athabascan language San Carlos Apache, and the human languages Cocopa, Maricopa, and Ipai, and the Algonquian language Arapaho do not have dedicated caritive markers. These languages seem to employ different strategies to replace them. As there are few published texts in these languages, it was difficult to me to identify the kinds of alternatives that these languages prefer. An example from Seri illustrates the use of a negative verbal predicate. The phrase coffee without sugar has been restructured as coffee in which sugar has not been put, using the negative predicate not to put. Multiple parallels between Mesoamerica and the cultures of the American Southwest have been identified thus far, ranging from mythology and iconography to economic relations. There is no doubt that these two areas have been interrelated since prehistoric times. This is not surprising due to the extent of the border zone and the absence of any natural geographical barriers that would have impeded communication among the inhabitants. The present study corroborates the fact that the Mesoamerican area is well defined in the south, and by contrast is separated vaguely from neighboring areas to the north. Well, conclusions. At first, a microtypological conclusion of this study is that the absent linguistic traits can be as equally decisive and important in aerial studies as the present traits. Thus, the absence of dedicated caritive markers can be added to the list of distinctive traits of the Mesoamerican area, together with other well-known features that are present in these languages. Three different strategies to express the caritive meaning have been identified in the languages of Mesoamerica. The first is the borrowing of the Spanish preposition sin. The diffusion of this strategy may correlate well with language vitality and the percentage of monolingual speakers. The second option is the development of specific caritive markers that have narrow semantics and limited lexical compatibility. Some Mesoamerican languages have caritive markers that can only combine with nouns denoting body parts or clothes, for instance. It would seem that the development of such markers has been reinforced by the absence of a universal general caritive marker. The third and the most widespread possibility is the use of negative constructions. It can be based on existential or copulative predicates. The same language may naturally employ more than one strategy. And negative constructions, negative commutative constructions are not a common option for expressing the caritive meaning in Mesoamerican languages. This may be considered to be an empirical argument for viewing the commutative and the caritive as two meanings that are not as closely related as has been argued. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Igor. There were already quite a few remarks in the chat. Peter, could you probably ask them themselves?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Igor. It's very interesting. I just have a couple of clarification questions with regard to particular examples. First of all, you gave us an example of the use of the Spanish sin in Chimalapesoque, and my question would be whether it can combine with native nouns, because sin remedio could just be a borrowing of a phrase from Spanish.
Yes, it can. It can.
Great.
It can combine.
And my next question regards the negative copular construction in a variety of automy. Could you please, comment a little bit about the syntax of this example, if possible?
It seems to me that there are two clauses here. I cut the meat is the first one, and the second one can be literally translated as this is not the knife, or something like that.
With some sort of identification construction.
Sorry?
Some sort of identifying construction.
I think there are two clauses that are just juxtaposed one to another.
Okay, and well, I'm wondering if there is any evidence for or against a possible reanalysis, because unless we know that it is in fact two separate clauses, probably separated by a pause or something, we could just think that this hinge is a caritive preposition or something of this kind.
Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is that hinge is commonly used in negative copulative sentences, like, I don't know, I'm not a man or something like that. Well, this is an interesting idea. Yeah, it can be reanalyzed in this grammar. This example is derived from a grammatical description of this dialect, and in this grammar, the word hinge is almost always used as a synonym of sin, a borrowed preposition.
Interesting. Thank you.
5 more minutes for questions, please.
I'm sorry, a clarification question. Could you get back to this sin remedio thing? And I don't know if it is a question for you or for you, for Peter, but do you mean that it can be borrowed as a whole because it has a non-compositional meaning that is inevitably or something like this? Does it really mean a medicine?
I think it is possible to borrow the whole constructions in Remedio. However, this word sin is also used with other nouns and also with nouns of Soke origin.
No, I mean, do they really are they really talking about any kind of medicine?
I think so.
So they don't want to say that we had to go there anyway, inevitably, or something like this. Because sin remedio is non-compositional.
I'm not sure I remember well the context. It seems to me that they're talking just about that they went to the forest and there happened something like there was a snake that probably caused some problems to them, and there was a problem that they did not have medicine. If I remember well, I'm not sure.
I see.
Thank you. Tim has a small question.
Yes, I also wonder if there can be drawn any generalization about the way the nonverbal constructions are used in these languages. Are they normally in some subordinate clause, or are they in a coordinated clause, or it really can't be said judging by these examples? So is there any marking for subordinate clauses?
I'm not sure I'm able to answer this question. I think this depends on a particular language.
Okay,
no,
at least.
I think I'm not able to make this generalization now.
Yeah, well, okay. If we could just look at those from Pocomchi and Mesquital. Yes, these ones. So here, at least how you would think about it, is it possible that these are actually covert subordinate clauses, or are they just coordinated?
Yeah, the problem is that in Pocomchi there are also examples without this subordinate key. They are also possible.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Any more questions or remarks? We have 1 minute. In that case, thank you, Igor.